Welcome to Weapons of Meme Destruction Podcast, episode 222, which can be found at WMDpodcast.com/222. You can find the audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. And you can get the video on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and X. David, today is a happy occasion.
Let's not bicker and argue about who killed who.
David and I discussed a couple different episode topics for you today. Because we like to kind of bring you things a little off the beaten path, because you can, tune in and hear what Rachel Maddow says about pretty much anything that's big and just do the exact opposite. So we like to bring you stuff off the beaten path. And, we had some more down in the dumps, angry type topics. And then we had a happier
including
topic,
a repeat offender.
Yes.
It was almost that time of year, guys. It was almost the Crenshaw time of year. God.
But, we're recording this the day after Thanksgiving, 2024. And, we're like,
our Lord.
It's nice to give the people some happy news every once in a while. So that's what we're doing today. Today, we're talking about DOGE's, and this is a very high-level summary of the plan. Obviously, there's many more details to be hashed out as they really get into it. But a very high-level 5-point plan of what DOGE, the Department of Governmental Efficiency, that is going to be headed up by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, that is basically going to gut the administrative and deep state at the federal level. And we're going to talk about their plan, give you our thoughts on it. I think you'll be happy to hear what they have in store. And then, we'll just be, I'm just thankful. I'm thankful, David, that for the first time in my lifetime, although I felt like fucking Don Quixote out here forever, just tilting at windmills all day long, telling people till I was blue in the face how terrible the administrative state is, how it's a fourth branch of government that's completely unconstitutional, how somebody needs to, if not completely eliminate it, pare it back heavily. And it really felt like nothing but, like I said, tilting at windmills. But now it seems like something tangible and concrete might actually be accomplished. We can only hope.
And all it took was a billionaire that was playing the role of Tony Stark a little too hard, apparently, according to some celebrities. But there's a I don't want to get too confident too quickly, but there's a little hope, light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, with Elon and I believe it's Vivek, right?
Yeah,
are going to be cutting it down. It's interesting times. May you live in interesting times. You sent me a TikTok earlier of who was that? It was the little the guy with the gobble that was breaking down what Elon did with Twitter, where Elon sat down with literally every single employee of Twitter and gave them 5 minutes to save their own ass.
To justify their existence at Twitter.
And you saw what happened. 80% of Twitter was let go, and it's like you alluded to before we started recording, Dane. It's running even better than it ever has.
Has more features than it used to have.
Even though it's not supported by the government anymore, because that went out the window when the censorship went out. It seems to be doing more betterer now for some reason.
Yeah.
It's almost like when the government was there was no incentive to actually do your job, and they were more than willing to have you paid for not doing your job, as opposed to, making sure a company is run efficiently and is up to the task of performing their abilities to the best of their abilities. So
right.
It's just interesting. So I'd like to see what he did. If he could do even a modicum of what he did with Twitter, with the federal government and all the agencies that are attached to said federal government, this is exciting times.
Indeed. So to kind of set the stage for this, like I said, this 5-point plan, let's do a little bit of, constitutional revision, refresh our memories on, how the federal government is supposed to operate, and juxtapose that to how it does operate to kind of see and understand before we get into the points why they're taking the tack they do. Because, as good libertarians that David and I are, we are not big fans of the use of executive orders, because executive orders themselves are constitutionally dubious. What you're supposed to have is, as we all know, the 3 branches of government. The legislative is the one that writes the laws. That's the one that is the direct representative of the people. So it is supposed to be the voice of the people where they, somebody brings a bill to the floor and the people's representatives debate it. And ostensibly, in theory, the result of that is supposed to be laws that are reflecting the interests of, if not all, the vast majority of the American people. Now, I know, hold your breath, don't laugh. We all know that that's not how the legislature works in practice. But again, I'm just the theory first. So the legislature writes the laws. The executive branch enforces the laws. So they're not supposed to have any sort of extrajudicial legislative authority in the branches of the executive authority. So the president is not supposed to be able to, as Obama famously said, with his pen and his phone, he's not supposed to be able to legislate through the use of executive orders. He needs to wait on Congress to do something, and then he just is supposed to, unbiased, in a nonpartisan way, enforce whatever Congress, passes in the form of a law. Again, that's why executive orders are not ideal under our constitutional framework, but that's what we have. That's what we're left with here today. And then obviously the judicial branch is there to determine, as the kind of last stop on the last check on the federal authority, to say, all right, even though Congress said that this is a law, and even though the executive is ready, willing, and able to enforce it, we think under the constitutional interpretation that this law is not abiding by the strict, limited, and enumerated powers granted to the federal government by the Constitution, so we're going to strike it down. And we're going to say that law is null and void because it violates the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution. Again, very Cliff Notes, short Schoolhouse Rock version. That's how it's supposed to run. We know we have a completely bastardized system in practice where the legislature routinely enacts laws that have, single-digit approval ratings from the American people, or, you have 90+% retention on congressmen and women, despite, Congress having itself single-digit approval ratings. You have presidents acting like kings all the time with executive orders. You have, Supreme Court justices that are completely running amok and twisting the Constitution, the plain language of the Constitution to justify basically any growth of government. And so, fast forward almost 250 years, that's where we're at today. We're with a completely broken system that operates almost exclusively outside of the framework of the document that is supposed to confine it. And so in that light, what do? What does DOGE do? What does Elon and Vivek suggest, as a non-governmental agency, but basically they're going to act as advisors to President Trump to say, hey, here's the regulations we think you should get rid of. Here's why. Here's the legal authority, why we think you can do it. And then it's up to Trump to, again, it's an unfortunate situation that he has to use this tool, but primarily through the use of executive orders to eliminate many of the things that DOGE suggests to eliminate. So that's where we're at. That's what Vivek and Elon are proposing. I wanted to get that out in front at the beginning because I don't want any libertarian purists coming and, mucking up the sane space and saying, well, why are you guys okay with the use of executive orders? It's like, well, you gave us lemons. We're just trying to make lemonade.
Well, and then you might ask, well, Dane, that sounds like a pretty novel, pretty logical way to make sure that the government is running efficiently. Why hasn't any president used this executive order or used this idea to cut down on government over expenditure, over regulation, or over growth, period? Why would they not want that to happen, Dane?
It's all part of the same system. And, government is, because it's not beholden to the profit and loss system of like private enterprise, there's no check on it really, like in actuality. Like, yes, you have the words on the paper in the Constitution, but you need human beings that are, have fealty to the ideals of the scope of limited government prescribed by the Constitution to actually put it into practice. And, it's that famous quote by Milton Friedman, right? There is nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. Once they're in there, once they exist, presidents and congressmen are really no different. They are there to do one thing and one thing only, is to secure their power that they do have and expand it to the maximal degree
So they can keep
possible.
securing it.
Exactly. And so, yeah, unless you have somebody who, and again, I have been in past, and I think I'm probably wrong about this. I have been dubious of the idea that Trump is a true outsider. I thought he was controlled opposition, and maybe in some respects he is. We've voiced our concerns about foreign policy, but it seems on the domestic side, based on his policy preferences, the things that really drives the deep state the most angry about him, seems to be an outsider's perspective, a perspective of, hey, I'm not part of this political class. I'm not this Joe Biden been in federal government for 50 plus years. I am an outsider in that respect. So I don't have any fealty to this system, how it's currently established. I can, gut it and rest easy at night. So again, if the words translate into actions, I will eat all of the crow that's due to me for suggesting that Trump, wasn't as much of an outsider as he seems to be at this point. And I will applaud all the way to the bank, for him doing it and Elon and Vivek coming through for him.
Well, and back to the subject of using executive, what is it called again? Executive
orders.
Okay, just making sure. Executive privilege. No, executive orders. To get rid of former executive orders or to get rid of some of this stuff. It reminds me of that old phrase that they use in gambling a lot. I heard it on the JRE to give him credit. You have to get better the same way you got sick. And what that means is you have to start winning your games and get your money back the same way you lost it. You have to get sick the way, or you have to get better the way you got sick. So you have to find your way out of this hole. No one's there to dig you out. So yeah, you have to start using these executive orders how they were meant to be used in order to get back on the right track, because it's been so bastardized and manipulated over the years that, like you said, this. And then I'm going to quote Batman here again. When the forest has become overgrown, a purging fire is necessary. This is the purging fire. We can all agree. It doesn't matter. Well, we should be able to agree. Of course, then again, the lefties are pretty salty right now. So we'll give them a little time. We'll give them a little time before they can come back. But I would think that if you sat down and, as we always say, put a beer in between the two of you and hashed it out, you would come to the same conclusion that something is not working up in DC. It's not. Whether you're on the right and you're a bleeding heart, Trumpy, and you think that he's going to solve everything, or whether or not you think that you lost democracy on November 5th, it doesn't matter. We can all agree that whatever's been going on up there has not been working. So this is, again, it's a step in the right direction in a bright new future. And I just hope, like I said, all we have is hope. We live in it. Trump is what you were just saying. He's not a, puppet, supposed opponent, but then he gets in and he's a Manchurian candidate, whatever. Hopefully he does wield this power with some efficacy, with some dignity, with some responsibility, I guess you could call it. It doesn't seem like there's been any responsibility up there for however long. Just look at the IRS and the audit of Congress, and they haven't met it. What, the last 7 years? They've missed their audit. They just can't pass it. And
the Department of Defense.
Sorry, the Department of Defense. Yeah. So again, do they get sent to jail? Look, like any of those 80,000 extra employees that they just brought in a couple of years ago, do they show up on Capitol Hill to pull these guys?
That is the IRS.
What's that?
The 80,000 employees, that is the IRS.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The IRS, DOD, all that alphabet soup. They're not acting responsibly.
But what I'm saying is, here, just let me finish my point. Don't muddy the waters with facts and figures, Dane. Please. All I'm saying is they've been misusing money for the past 7 years. They haven't passed an audit, and no one's coming to collect them to throw them in jail for it. I miss my fucking taxes by $100. I better come up with that $100 or I'm going to jail. And it always comes back to that rules for thee and not for me. And it's time that it changes. The Crenshaw thing, he was going into a big old tirade about voting against members of Congress stock trading. He's like, this is 1,000. This is priority 1,000 for me. I don't even have it. And then just gaslighting, and making it sound like nobody except for Nancy Pelosi, who might have done a little bit of it, has been engaging in this. And it's time we start holding our leaders accountable. And hopefully DOGE is the first step in a huge direction of being able to do that again.
Yeah. And, I promise we're going to get into the 5 points. I just want to put one more finer point on this, libertarian purist kind of point. Yes, if you had a perfect libertarian president, then they would not do anything not authorized by the executive without the consent of Congress. However, let's keep in mind the real world facts on the ground that we live in today, November 29th, 2024. What did Trump's own party, after the American people gave him the mandate of all mandates, and not just him personally, they gave him the Senate and they gave him the House. And what did his own party do just days after he was elected? The outgoing majority leader, Senator Mitch McConnell, orchestrated a secret vote in order to vote for the new Senate majority leader, which, again, the reason why that and the House majority leader are so important is because they set the agenda. They are the primary drivers of which bills actually get to the floor to have a vote. They have, if not us, not going to say unilaterally, but they have a substantial amount of authority to kill bills before they even get out of committee to a main floor vote, to even have an opportunity to pass. So before, and again, this goes back to that people of the regime, people that have been in it for a long time, their bread is buttered by making sure that the system never changes. People of his own party in the Senate managed to, again, with a secret vote, not waiting to vote for a majority leader until after Trump was inaugurated and the new incoming slate of senators could actually have a say on this, the ones that just won election in this go around. They orchestrated putting John Thune, which is a neocon, rhino of all rhinos, that doesn't give a shit about the American people or any sort of ideals about limited government and fiscal responsibility. And he's going to be sending money to Ukraine. Like, he's one of those Republicans. He's a Dan Crenshaw type Republican. And that can only be done for one reason, is to thwart the agenda that they can see coming with the incoming Trump administration. So yes, a perfect libertarian president could sit on his hands for 4 years and say, well, Congress didn't allow me to do this and Congress didn't allow me to do that. And then he would get absolutely zero things accomplished. Or he can pick up, admittedly, the ring to rule them all, so to speak, the executive order, which is built on decades and decades of precedent established by both Democrats and Republicans, that presidents have been operating outside of their authority, but for once, that illegitimate authority can be used to dismantle whole swaths of the administrative state, which Congress would never authorize via legislation, because they're already trying, before the new incoming senators have even sat in their chairs, they're trying to thwart that effort. So that's where we're at.
Which proves our fucking point that it's not blue, it's not red, it's fucking purple up there. They're
them
both
versus
in on
us.
it. Right.
Yes.
Like, again, anybody that takes umbrage with, if they can't even see that getting somebody that, like you said, is not tied to DC, that's not tied to politics, that hasn't been in there, that hasn't been a lifer in there. Ronald Reagan is held up as one of the gold standards of the Republicans. If the Republican Party isn't happy that, I'm sorry, I jumped the shark, or I got to my point too soon. The point about Ronald Reagan is that he was a fucking actor before he went in there. And all he went in there was all he went in there with was the best intentions. And he somehow came out as like the gold standard for Republican candidates from then until apparently now. And what was the thing that set him apart was that he was not an insider. He was not in politics the entire time. That's what Trump is. Now, do I think he's more bombastic? Do I think Trump's more into his own Bruno Males? Yeah, I think so. But that could actually be a good thing, because he's going to want to be remembered as the best president ever. So hopefully that's enough. That seems like a guy that has a huge ego, which we all know Trump does. That seems like something that means a lot to him. And hopefully he does. Because I'm sitting here listening to you go, yeah, we have to pick up the one ring to rule them all. And I'm sitting there going, oh, this is how it happens, isn't it? And this is how it happens. Like, well, we have to do this, right? Or we have to press this bomb. We have to press this big red button, right? Like,
yeah. Well, but here's the unique thing about that is, yes, executive orders are that sort of like Lord of the Rings type situation. Yeah. However, what it's being used for matters. Right? If we go back and we dutifully read our Lord of the Rings, right? Frodo used the ring for
They should have just used the eagles, for God's sake. The book should have been 5 pages long.
Yeah.
Fuck.
But, the ring had its cloaking abilities and its other powers that Frodo used to ultimately get it to Mordor and destroy it and all of that kind of stuff. And it could do all these other evil things with it too. If Trump uses the executive authority, the executive orders to dismantle the government. Okay, I cannot be more forceful in my excitement for that because, again, by definition, for my leftist friends out there, that is by definition anti-fascist, anti-tyrannical, anti-dictatorial. Because by eliminating these powers that the government has brought unto itself, which a nefarious, legitimately fascist, evil dictator, if one were to come to the office of the presidency in the future, could use all of that power to do all kinds of terrible things, right? Like suspending your Fourth Amendment rights, by spying on you, by doing all the things that the Patriot Act and the NSA have been doing.
Trying to control your speech or anything like that, yeah.
Yes.
Compelled speech.
If a truly evil president came to power, they could use all those powers. But if Trump,
let's just say,
says, I'm going to use the ring and I'm going to eliminate as much as I can. I'm going to start slashing. I'm going to slash this, that from the
everything must go
from the
Billy
authority.
Mays here. Sorry.
From the authority of the federal government. Then not only does he, for the rest of his term, from this point in time that he takes that action onward, not only does he no longer have that authority to use in himself, but he prevents a future president from doing it unless, again, they just unravel his shit and they reinstitute all of the bad agencies and regulations again, which again is not outside the realm of possibility. But the point is,
it's going to take a while to do that, though.
If you're using the ring of power to dismantle the power source, to make it weaker, even if you're only making it marginally weaker, that is a decidedly anti-fascist, anti-dictator, anti-tyrant move. Because you're limiting your own authority while you're in the office, and you're eliminating the potential abuse of that unjust authority by future presidents down the line. So again, I cannot be more adamant about the fact that this is the exact opposite of what Rachel Maddow will tell you Trump is. If he does this. Now, again, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't.
It's from the same people that were trying to do exactly what we were afraid that they were trying to do. Rachel Maddow,
it's upside down world with these people.
They just don't. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
If you're still concerned about Rachel Maddow, I have concerns for you. That's basically what I got to say. And the funny thing is, and again, I think that's why, if we can take a side note too, before we get into the 5 points, is that's why they were so virulent. That's why they were so vicious coming after Trump, because they knew this was their last stand. I don't know what happens to CNN now. I don't know what happens to MSNBC now, because they've burned their bridges with the American people. They've made that perfectly clear. The American people don't trust them anymore. Fox to some extent too, because Fox is, I hate to break it to the, conservative listeners here, but they're kind of bought and paid for as well. So again, I don't know where legacy media goes after this, but I know one thing's for sure, that now that Trump's started by making us, apparently we're a part of the media now too, Dane. We're just as viable as MSNBC. Didn't he say podcasts were another source of media? What press passes or something like that?
They're going to start allowing certain podcast hosts and stuff like that to have press credentials to be in the briefings. Perhaps for the White House spokesperson briefings. Basically, what Jean-Pierre,
when the deuce is loose.
Jean-Pierre, yeah.
So we can be the deuce loose. We can be the loosey deuces.
Listen, your boys might get some press passes and be able to ask questions
Hey,
you know,
now.
Joey Rogues and whoever. So
Don't forget about Garnett. Anything is possible.
yeah.
Anything is possible. Sorry. Anyway, with that being said, Dane,
yeah,
shall we
could
stop
be
burying
good
the
things
lead?
on the horizon. Yes.
Right.
So let's get into the 5 points. So the first point, and again, not in this particular, it's not like they're going to do number 1 and then number 2, but the 5 key pillars to the DOGE program is going to be this. First, they aim to remove regulations that Congress never explicitly authorized using recent Supreme Court decisions as legal backing. Now, we talked about some of these in real time when they happened. There was a 2022 Supreme Court decision called West Virginia versus EPA. And then there was a decision earlier this year in 2024, which was Department of Commerce, Loper Bright Enterprises v. Raimondo. And the holding, essentially, of those 2 opinions by the Supreme Court is this Chevron case, which is just called Chevron deference from like 1984, I want to say. Basically, what the Supreme Court said in Chevron is when Congress passes a law, if there's any gray area in terms of how to apply that law via regulations, then the administrative agencies have carte blanche to basically interpret Congress's meaning and then regulate however they see fit, right? It's government by experts, right? So if the legislature passes a law that says there shall not be X number of particles of carbon per deciliter of air, blah, 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 and that's all they say, then the EPA steps in and they say, okay, we're going to need these 47,000 regulations in order to meet that target of carbon, right? So what it encourages, and what we talked about at the time, is it encourages a very lazy legislature, right? They don't need to get into the weed and details of everything. They just need to pass some overarching thing and not account for any of the potential implications of it. And it encourages, in addition to that lazy legislature, an overzealous regulatory body that says, hey, we got a pretty blank check. We can write these regulations as broad and as expansive as we want. And that leads into this concept in public choice theory, which is regulatory capture. So now you have, no pun intended, Chevron, the company whose name appeared on that 1984 case. They now go to the EPA with their army of lobbyists and they say, hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Why don't you pass a regulation that does A, B, and C? It'll get you towards your goal. Well, what Chevron is really after is they're really after creating red tape and bureaucratic bullshit for smaller competitors to wade through that Chevron can with its several billions of dollars and army of lawyers. And so it keeps competition out. So Chevron becomes more richer and more powerful.
It also prevents progress.
Yes, because it absolutely does that.
I think Elon was just talking about how they were talking about a high-speed railway or something like that. In California, they signed off on it. And they spent $6 to $7 billion to make sure that it happened. And I think they've laid concrete for 1,600 meters, and that's it. And this thing has been going on for years. And he said the reason why is just regulations. There's too many regulations. It costs too much to do too little and it slows down too much. It just impedes progress, and everyone wants it. And the thing is that just like the government works, everybody gets a slice of the pie. Everybody gets their little, well, we got to pull 1,600 out for here because we have to pay for this regulation to be passed and yada, yada. And it just over encumbers everything. It slows everything down to a standstill. So refer back to it. Well, what episode was that? 20 or 200 and shit. I can't even remember. Well, we were discussing regulations and why they sound good because, if without regulations, we'd have child labor. We wouldn't have child labor laws, and you get that kind of like emotional response to it. But that's not what regulations are anymore. It comes back to the Chevron case that you were just talking about. And, if you can't grease the right palms or you can't get the right people to go along with you, then don't ever try to get anything done, pretty much.
So these 2 recent Supreme Court cases, basically, they stand for the proposition of, I know, shocking concept of is maybe the federal government should operate as the Constitution commands. Maybe the legislature should be clear about what their laws are. And then, you can have a much leaner executive branch that enforces that clearly defined law. And if that law is in some way, if the regulations that come out of that law are in some way violative of the Constitution, well, then the Supreme Court stands there to say, nope, go back to the drawing board, Congress, and try again. Be more clear about this thing or more clear about that thing, because the way that it's working out in practice is it's violating X, Y, or Z, constitutionally protected right. Crazy concept, I know, and it's total fascism come to America that the conservative Supreme Court would have the audacity to overturn one of its own really bad precedents if what you care about is democracy, if you care about the will of the people being expressed through their elected representatives, not their unelected, nameless, faceless army of bureaucrats, if you care about those things, then you are ecstatic, not only about West Virginia VEP and Loper Bright Enterprises, about those Supreme Court precedents that overturned Chevron, but you are now excited about the first point in the DOGE plan, which is to say, let's identify what regulations Congress has not specifically authorized. And then let's use those two Supreme Court cases to say, all right, Congress didn't speak clearly on this point. The EPA wants to do this thing anyway. Well, let's gut it. Get rid of that regulation. And if Congress really thinks that that regulation was super, super important, then it needs to do its fucking job. The people that are elected so that they can be accountable because again, here's the third point finally before we move on to the second in the DOGE list is the other thing is when the American people don't have a clear delineation of who is responsible for what is negatively impacting their life, how can they make informed decisions about whether Congressman X or Y should stay or go, right? Because the congressman can just go back to their district and say, hey, listen, I just said I wanted clean air. If the EPA passed a regulation that's, destroying your small business, don't get mad at me, get mad at the EPA. And then that person keeps getting elected forever.
And don't you want clean air? Don't you want clean air for your kids?
What are you, some kind of misanthrope?
Right, exactly. Again, remember, go back to all of our episodes ever and just say whatever the government says it's doing something, it's probably doing the opposite. Or it definitely has something different. Like the Build Back Hawaii. It's like, we want to give $6 million to Hawaii. And then in subtext, and then $60 billion to Ukraine. Who wouldn't want to do that,
Right.
Fuck you.
So a lot of that goes out the window where the people can now see more clearly, hey, Mr. Representative from my district, you voted on this thing. Mm-hmm. This thing absolutely destroyed my business when it, this regulation went into effect, because now, again, the burden is laid at the feet of where it always should have stayed, which is at the feet of the elected representatives. And now the citizen can go, you know what? I don't think you have my interests in mind. I think you're legislating for somebody else or trying to, put money in your own pockets. Out you go, buddy. It starts to fix a whole lot of things that are poisoning the system once you, again, reshift the focus back to what is constitutionally required, which is the legislature is the one that's supposed to write the law, and it needs to be clear, concise, and precise. And when it's not, then the people can vote accordingly and hold their representatives accountable. And this is why they fight tooth and nail against this kind of stuff. They love the unaccountability in terms of Congress, of being able to pass the buck off onto the administrative state and say, not my fault. But again, if DOGE is able to do this, and those two, with the authority of those two Supreme Court precedents, we'll start to see a lot of those regulations repealed, and then Congress is going to have to act as to whether or not they want to keep them or change them. All right, point 2 on the DOGE plan is they plan to cut many federal workers, but they plan to do it through workforce reductions, bypassing civil service protections by using existing reduction in force authorities rather than targeting specific employees. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean, hey, we're going to go into the DOJ and we're going to identify all those fucks that were engaging in lawfare for the past 4 years and we're going to axe them. Because unfortunately, there are laws that, create protections for civil service workers not to be fired like that. You basically need very good cause to eliminate them, or you can't really do it. But what you can do is through workforce reduction authorities, you can offer, say, for example, large severance packages. You can say, hey, Mr. Person who's worked at the EPA for 40 years, we're going to give you, 2 years worth of salary and a hefty pension. Just go ahead and retire now. That person leaves voluntarily. They take their severance package. Again, the libertarian in me is appalled by the fact that a career government parasite gets to ride off into the sunset with a generous government pension. But again, we're just playing the ball as it lies. But if you can eliminate whole swaths of agencies, you got to pay that severance package and that pension, but that person's job no longer exists.
Sometimes,
to the point that some agencies may disappear entirely.
Better just to let the chick take the dog and move on with your life.
Yep.
Sometimes it's just better not to fight it. Because you stay there, you fight over the dog for another 2 years. It means they're still there for another 2 years, and you're just sitting here pissed off still about being in a relationship somehow with this goddamn person. Sometimes it's just better to cut your losses and move on.
Yeah. And like I said, by using those authorities rather than just firing people, you're not opening the government up to a whole bunch of, wrongful termination lawsuits, which cost even more money. You really are doing a cost benefit of analysis here. It's two bad options. Either you got to pay these parasites to walk away voluntarily, or, you can shit can them because you don't like the way their breath smells. And then you got to fight a lawsuit out for however many years that costs however many millions of taxpayer dollars. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But at least with the first option, you get a heavy chunk of people to walk. And then when they walk, you don't replace them with anybody. And you just naturally, through attrition, reduce the workforce of the federal bureaucracy.
I see a lot of office space opening up in the DC area very quickly.
I think so too.
I think we should start investing heavily in that, Dane.
No, I think the opposite. I think real estate owners, commercial real estate owners in DC are nervous.
No, we can invest against. Can we? What was that? Futures? Can we invest against the?
Yeah, we can short DC real estate.
Let's do it right now. I'm ready for it.
Yeah. All right. So point 3. They will stop federal spending that wasn't, and this is kind of a dovetail with the first point, which was targeted at regulation. This is targeted directly at spending, is stop federal spending that was not authorized by Congress, which according to current estimates is about $500 billion. So again, just like when Congress doesn't write a clear law and that leaves a whole gray area for all kinds of regulation to run amok, same kind of thing with appropriations. When Congress writes a law, passes a bill that says, here's all of the money that we're going to appropriate to X, Y, or Z, but they're not explicit about where that money goes or how it's spent. Well, then, magically, the infinite spigot just gets directed into this agency or that agency to expand their budget, hire more people, do more things that they're not authorized to do, et cetera, et cetera. So this third point is to basically, again, get Congress, stop with these omnibus packages that just authorize billions and billions of dollars that don't direct where they go. Make Congress be explicit. That way, when they vote, you have a name next to an outflow of money, and you can bitch at that name when they come to your town hall and try to tell you how good of a job they're doing.
What a concept! Receipts.
Yeah. I know,
Receipts
right?
on the money that we give them. What a fucking 250 years down the road, maybe we should start monitoring where all this shit goes.
This is tyranny, David. Tyranny, I tell you.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah. All right. Number 4. They intend to improve cost efficiency in government procurement by conducting large-scale audits of old contracts. David was just talking about this a little bit ago. Widely reported the last few weeks, to the shock of nobody, which should be to the chagrin of everybody, is that the DOD has failed its 7th consecutive audit. Now, the DOD gets about $800 billion a year. And listen, I'm no math magician, but if federal revenue is roughly $4 trillion a year, north of $4 trillion, that's roughly a quarter of the entire income, not expenditures, because again, the government spends another $2 trillion more than they even take in, hence the $35 trillion debt. But of just revenue, of stolen funds from all of us, $4 trillion a year, roughly a quarter of that goes to the Department of Defense, and they can't so much as give you a "hey, how you doing?" or a "fuck you" on an audit, to be able to pass the thing in the last 7 years. So I rather think it's a pretty good idea to go back and examine some of those contracts and figure out, why aren't you passing audits? Where is the money going? And, explain yourself.
If we're giving you a large sum of money, it would be like, Shark Tank. They just let some Tom, Dick, and Harry walk in there and go, this is a electronic dog poop scooper. Like, how does it work? I don't know. All right, here's all of our money. Do you want any background information? No, take it. Take it. And then when it doesn't perform well in the market, we're like, more money. Go ahead, more money. We don't care what you do with it. Like, again, it's the expenditure and waste in the government through and throughout, not just the DOJ, obviously, but it's rife through everything. So again, we've been bitching, like you said, Don Quixote. We've been just fucking fighting windmills and telling Sancho Panza to go fuck himself. But it seems like now with a little hope, a little self-regulation, we might be able to get this back on the right track. There, Chris Farley. But anyway.
Yeah. And to David's point about it's rampant throughout all of government, that's what the fourth point is directed at. It's talking about cost efficiency, about government procurement across all agencies. And again, and the reason why we spent so much time talking about executive orders on the front end is because not only can Trump with executive orders accomplish all of these things, so he doesn't need Congress. He doesn't need, again, the completely captured Republican Senate that just pulled this, fast one with their new majority leader, define the will of the American people. And it doesn't need, the House of Representatives to co-sign Trump's agenda. Trump can say, listen, you're the legislature. You've done what you've done. You've passed your laws. You've spoken. But with all of those laws, you have emboldened all of these executive branch agencies, who I am the head of, to do all of these unconstitutional things. And so as the head of this branch of government, I'm going to write an executive order that says, this agency doesn't exist anymore. This agency is overstaffed by 80%. This agency needs to do better at passing its audits, and here's how they're going to do it. He can, with executive orders, he can enact these things, and he doesn't need Congress to do it. That's the key factor here is, again, we don't like presidents acting unilaterally like this. We don't like them acting like God kings, but the ball is where it's at, and now it's time to play it. And if playing it results in massive reductions of executive agencies, which is what this is focused on, then all the better for us, the American people who have been getting fleeced for decades and decades. And that's why we're in, the financial predicament we're in. And so hopefully this, at least, if doesn't derail it, slows the gravy train from the federal bureaucracy's perspective down a little bit. Because fifth, and the reason why we wanted to point that out for number 4 about that's government wide, the fifth point, and this really speaks to how big the Defense Department weighs on the federal budget. The fifth part of the plan has its own pillar. It is to address waste at the Department of Defense, which, as we said, has a budget of more than $800 billion and has failed its 7th consecutive audit. So, across the board, I can't find anything in this not to be thankful for.
Well, I remember a story, Dane. Perhaps you will too. It was right around the time that, was it Lanai? Was that the one that burnt to the ground? Wasn't Lanai.
Where?
Hawaii. Was it Lanai?
Yeah, I can't remember the name exactly.
When the island of Hawaii that burned to the ground was still smoldering.
Yeah.
They couldn't help. I think they sent everyone $700 to rebuild their lives.
Something like that, yeah.
And during that same week, a report came out that $6 billion was unaccounted for in the Ukrainian money laundering scam that we were still in.
Yeah.
And it was also not lost on us because in the same week they reported that that island could have been rebuilt with $6 billion. So literally they just lost $6 billion. That $6 billion could have rebuilt Americans' houses, lives, everything. But they don't care. And again, no heads rolled over the $6 billion. Everyone just went, oh, well, fine, fuck it.
Yeah.
So again, maybe an unintended consequence of this is that more people will give more of a shit about Americans getting helped out as opposed to, sending money to places that we don't want to send money to fight in a war that we don't really want to fight in.
Right.
Again, maybe one of these unintended consequences is maybe a little humanity comes back to Washington, D.C. for once.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Well,
and this isn't one of the 5 points, but this is a nice little topper, a little cherry on top that I find personally, for sentimental reasons, to be one of my favorite parts of the plan. Is if you're doing the math, you're doing the quick maths at home. July 4th, 2026 is going to be the 250th birthday of the United States.
Yay!
And the plan, according to Musk and Ramaswamy, is that all of these changes that we just discussed, they hope to have on President Trump's desk, and either with the executive order signed or, whatever he still needs to do past July 4th. But they want to have everything that DOGE has set out to do done by July 4th, 2026, at which point they will disband the Department of Governmental Efficiency, which the reason why that tickles my heart so much sentimentally is because of, like that Milton Friedman quote that I shared earlier about, there's nothing so temporary as a permanent government program. Like, this is the way it always goes.
It's the other way around, Dane. It's the other way around.
Sorry. Nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. I know.
I was like, we can't let that one slide.
Yeah. Permanence and temperance. Yes.
Yeah.
That's the way it always goes. Government's like, oh, we have this crisis and we got to do this one thing, like the Patriot Act. Oh Perfect. My God, 9/11 happened. We got to take back all of these super unconstitutional powers because it's going to protect American lives. And, once this terrorist threat is, finally stamped out, we'll get rid of it. And fast forward 23 years, 24 years, and hasn't happened yet. So, that is just the nature of things in government. They pass something, it's supposed to be a temporary fix to something or until some threat subsides, and then it goes away, but yet it never does. And that's how we wind up with hundreds of thousands of regulations to where literally your every breath, you could probably find something illegal about doing it in federal law somewhere, that if they just wanted to bring down the hammer on you, they could do it. And that's how we wind up in that scenario. So it's particularly beautiful, right, if they accomplish it on the timeline that they do. Now, maybe they'll get into it and this will be way more of a Gordian knot to untangle than they had anticipated, and it's got to push past July 4th, 2026. But if they get the timeline done and they're able to, as a birthday present to we the people, to the land of the free, as a birthday present, say, here, we're giving you at least some semblance of a government back that is accountable to you in this great American experiment, which is an experiment of complete control and sovereignty by the people instead of in a sovereign like a king. We're going to give some of that sovereignty back to you and, let freedom ring, so to speak. If they accomplish that as a 250th birthday present for us on July 4th, 2026, and just, do their job and then disband DOGE, that will be particularly beautiful, poetic even, in my view. So, I almost get kind of teary-eyed thinking about it. So, here, cheers to them, and let's hope they get it done.
Yeah, well, I'll salute it when it happens, but I have a feeling that this job is going to be intensive. We'll just put it that way. I feel like it's going to be fighting the Hydra. You get one down, another two pop up.
Well,
and let's not forget too, these things aren't going to go quietly.
No,
people don't relinquish power very easily. So I'm going to put a modicum of reality on that. But yes, Dane, it would be a perfect birthday present to America to give some semblance of what the government looked like or the intended purpose of the government back to the American people.
Well, I will say this. You do know how the story of the Gordian knot ended, correct?
No, you said a Gordian knot, and I was thinking like the pumpkin knot, like a squash knot, like a...
So the Gordian knot, this is in sort of the mythology of Alexander the Great, is the Gordian knot was this knot that nobody could unwind. It was so big, so complicated, whatever. And kings and wise men and people had come from all over the Middle East to try to figure out how to untie the Gordian knot. And Alexander shows up, and he takes one look at the knot, and he takes his sword and cuts the thing in half.
Mm-hmm.
He solved the problem of the Gordian knot. So, if it is super, super complicated, and we have no doubt that it will be,
throw it out.
And the entrenched interests are going to fight it tooth and nail as much as they possibly can, it's still no match for, a metaphorical sword going right through the middle of it. And that's what these executive orders are. So it's a beautiful story with a beautiful, sort of...
sounds like cheating to me. It kind of sounds like cheating to me, Dane. I'm not going to lie to you. Like,
it is, but it's very effective.
Oh, he found
cheating.
The one thread that you had to pull, and then ha ha ha. But no, he's just like, fuck this shit. Chop. Like, whoa. Why didn't I think of that?
Hey, listen, they didn't call him Alexander the Great for nothing, okay? Sometimes, if you're going to
I think because he was still holding the sword, they didn't say shit. They're like, all right, you get this one. It's cool.
If you're going to conquer the known world by the time you're like, what was he, 23, 22, you got to cut a few corners, okay?
Yeah. Well, no shit. Which is not the cherry on top of this episode that we want. We don't want to cut corners. We want to get rid of the corners that are there. I don't know. I don't even know how to tie that analogy in, but god damn it.
Anyway, so that's our happy episode. I'm thankful for that. I think David is too. I hope you and the Sane Space are
on
too.
America's birthday or whatever the fuck Thanksgiving is.
And let's just watch this closely and cheer it all along the way. Every step, even if they accomplish 1/10 of what they set out to do, it'll be great for all of us. So let's get going.
And let's keep that positivity flowing into how many more weeks of 2024 do we have? It's not that many.
Something like
Jesus.
That. Pressing.
Anyway, we're getting older. Anyway, where can they find episode 222 of Weapons of Meme Destruction, Dane?
You can find this episode at wmdpodcast.com/222. They can get the audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. They can get the video on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and X. Go over while you're there at WMDpodcast.com. That's the mothership. Check out all of the ways to support the show. They're under the Support Our Work tab. You can support us directly, financially, with a $5, $10, or $15 a month recurring donation, a one-time donation of any amount, $1 if you want. But you can also definitely join our email list while you're over there to stay in contact with the show. That helps as well. And then also, just on all the platforms you see us, and follow us on as many as you can. Not to, you don't have to set notifications for all if we're too annoying to you, but, follow us on all of them, like, subscribe, share, get in the comments, and perhaps most important of all, just word of mouth. Tell your friends and family about us, help grow the Sane Space one more person at a time. And maybe on the other side of this thing, we'll be a little more sane, and hopefully the corollary to that is a lot freer.
Hey, you never know. We might get press passes, Dane. We might be up there. We might be up there swinging their dicks with the big dogs. Anyway, until next week, guys, stay safe. But more importantly, stay free.